Good.
And you'll get a little note saying that, but you will be able to go and catch this on the Fundy St. Lawrence Dawning Waters website under resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Pix.
Is there a chance to get a copy because it wasn't recorded of that video? Because I think that's really powerful.
It's an
Beautiful,
awesome video.
powerful.
It's on YouTube. So I got it
Okay,
on YouTube. If
thank
you
you.
can't find it, I sometimes it can be a little difficult to find. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll give you that information at the end. Okay. So 10 steps to becoming affirming. The first one we're going to talk about is creating an affirming committee or team. The second part we'll talk about is making contact with Affirm United, and I'll let you know the website again. Just going to scroll through these quickly. Create an inclusivity statement, create an equal marriage policy, educate your new team, develop an education plan. I know I'm going quickly, but I will say them again before I start each section, I promise. How to keep your folks, quote unquote, in the know, very important in the church. Create an action plan, your community of faith approval, and finally, the time to celebrate. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we can have a chat. And also so I can see my notes. That's the real reason. Quick second here. All right. So the first one was create an affirming committee. So the first thing that sort of happens usually is somebody has a feeling they've heard about this, maybe at a regional meeting, maybe they used to go to a church that was an affirming church. For different people, for different reasons, will come up with this idea of why aren't we affirming? You might get that question, or sometimes was in the case of my congregation when I interviewed with them, and you'll hear this a lot from new ministers that are coming out of places. A lot of new ministers are really interested whether or not your church is already affirming or not. If you've gone through that process, that tells them a lot about your willingness to work through change together and to have hard conversations. And so just 5 years ago, I was ordained in 2019 with what was then Region 15. And that was one of my questions when I interviewed at places was, are you affirming ministry? And at one of the congregations I serve, I serve two pastoral charges. And at one of them, they said, oh yeah, we're really welcoming. And I said, oh, but are you affirming? And they said, we don't know what that means. And so that started a conversation. But the key thing that I will tell you is a minister should not be the steering person for a committee because it needs to come from the congregation. But that started a conversation within the congregation. And then shortly thereafter, probably we started during COVID, so it would have been in 2020. A couple folks came and said, how do we become affirming? How do we do that? You've talked about that a few times. How do we do that? And so it starts with a couple of small people, not small people, a small group of people. They might be small people. They could be big people. Doesn't matter. All people are welcome. But would gather together and sort of start that conversation about, well, what does it mean? Is that something maybe we could do here? Then that next step might look like, and this is very vague. So sometimes it comes from within the governing body itself, like the governing body, somebody in the governing body says, hey, we should do this. But sometimes it's somebody from outside, but it has to go through your governing body to kind of get legs, right? And so whatever the governing body, that small group of people would say, make a recommendation or perhaps a motion that the governing body put together an affirming steering committee, affirming team, affirming group. People call it all kinds of different things. We don't care what it's called as long as you're doing the work. So it's important, I think, to have the support of your decision-making body first. And then some people, even at that moment, take an opportunity to ask for a budget if they're really brave. And so that's another time to do that. And then after that, then it's that new team, that has started, that's going to start the process of becoming affirmed. They're the ones that are going to be responsible for that work. Just like in the church, a worship committee is responsible for the work of worship, an affirming team will be responsible for the work of becoming affirming. And then that affirming team will also be the liaison back to the governing body to say how the steps are going and anything that might have to be approved by a decision-making body, which we'll get to in just a moment. So I want to share my screen one more time tonight to show you how you first make contact with the Affirm United. You do not have to have a team in place to make contact. You could be an individual from your church that's really interested in this work and wants to know more information, so you can take it to your board and get them to start a team. But this is how you would get started. So let me share my screen again. And we are going to share this one. So this is the Affirm United website, and you'll find it at ause.ca. ause.ca. If you can't remember that, if you do Affirm United in Google, you'll find it. So on the very first part on this page, and actually, this is not the screen you usually come to. I jumped back. Let me go back one more, I think. There we go. This will be the opening page you'll come to, and you can choose English or French. So the full website is in both languages. So English, and then we're here at this page. Some people ask me, where can we get these candles? L'Arche makes beautiful rainbow candles, just for the record. That's a side note. But I do get asked that a fair bit. So on our website, the title section is here. And so this is where you'll kind of find all your drop-down menus that you might need. So what you're looking for when you first come is Affirming Ministries. We have information on why to become an Affirming Ministry. There's our Affirming Ministry program. Find a ministry. So let's have a quick look here, just real quick, out of curiosity. So find a ministry. Let's go to where we go? New Brunswick. Let's go to New Brunswick. And so you can find a list of all the people that have already gone through this process that consider themselves an affirming ministry. So if that gentleman in the video, for example, was interested and he did who's an affirming ministry in New Brunswick on Google, chances are he would come to the affirming ministry or the Affirm United website, because in Canada today, Affirm United is the only official certifying body, if you will, for churches. We work with United Churches primarily, but as you know, there are other churches that have some progressive work, but maybe not on a full church level, like individual churches have done some work, or individual presbyteries or individual conferences. But Affirm United is the only national body in Canada that's doing this work for churches. So this would be something someone would find if they went to Google, and then they could go through and find a local church. So let's go back up to the Affirming Ministries link. Find a ministry, affirming. So that's one of the parts that you would have. And then, of course, how are you going to find us? You're going to go to contact, Affirming Ministry Coordinators, right there. You would click that. And this is the way to reach us the first time. And the way to reach us the first time is because this will go to one person who will then decide, based on our geography, but also our workload, on who to send it to, who to send you to, right? So for example, right now, our usual coordinator for British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and half of Manitoba is off on leave. So it's myself and one other person are handling the country. So you can imagine that my workload is a little smaller here in Atlantic Canada and Quebec than my colleague that's handling the rest of Ontario, or all of Ontario and Manitoba. So I might get something from Saskatchewan. So that's why we're careful not to just say, I'm only for Atlantic Canada at this point. But now our new process is that this will go to one person who's coordinating all of the coordinators. So you would put in here what you're looking for, what kind of ministry type you are, and that is how you would reach us. After that, some people do choose to continue to use this to send through documents and things like that, but you don't have to once you are connected with your coordinator. You'll just send directly back and forth with them. Are there any questions before I leave the website about any of that, just so I don't have to screen share this again? Okay, hearing none, I'll move on. So that's how you make contact. The first thing that they've talked about as a region was creating an inclusivity statement. And we also call this our mission vision statement. And the mission vision statement of Affirm United, there's 3 documents primarily that we are looking for to be able to approve you to become to go to a vote for you to become an affirming ministry. And those documents are that inclusivity statement, an equal marriage policy, and an action plan. And so we'll go through each of these in these 10 steps tonight. But that's one of the first ones that people do have a look at. They have a look at their existing mission statement. And some of you might think, well, we don't have an existing mission statement because we're not affirming. And so that is a confusing piece for some folks. So let's get that confusion out of the way right away. So some folks think that you're making a mission statement about for your affirm team, just about affirming. So I want to be clear for you tonight to say that the mission or vision statement that you're creating is for the entire community of faith. This, oddly enough, can be an incredible sticky point for congregations, especially if they just spend a whole day in a conference reviewing their mission statement and they just rewrote it last June, for example. We've got to do that all over again. And some of you are smiling. You're like, yeah, I can hear that happening. So please know that the mission or vision statement can completely be redone, but it might be an addition to the existing mission statement. So your mission statement might be absolutely beautiful, but just requires some additional words. And so let's talk about that just a little bit. So there's 2 main documents that you'll be using as you go through this work and checking off all the check boxes. And if you're working with me and with my other colleagues who I forwarded this to, I created a checklist that kind of helps you so you don't have to dig through all those documents all the time to make sure you've got everything that we are looking for on our end to save us a lot of back and forth. Oh, you missed this part. Oh, you missed this part. I'm happy to send that through to the people I'm working with, or you can ask your coordinator for that. So the requirement is basically a statement that includes very particularly who you're including in the full life and work of your church. So the guidelines on writing that statement are found in the Open Hearts document. That's a 72-page document, which scares people. They say that's another thing that you'll have people in your church say, we don't have time to go through a 72-page document. So you can respond with this if you're the person that's saying, but we should do this. The 72-page document is not, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? We're getting to the end of the day, and this is when my ADHD meds start to wear off. So the word I'm looking for is prescriptive. It's not prescriptive. Okay, it's a resource. So it's not saying you must do this, 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 and this, and you must do all 72 pages of this. It's a resource. And what it helps to do is you might find a church very much like you. There's a lot of things that come from other churches in there, things that other people have done. But the work of an Affirm team is going to be very different based on where your church is, how many people there are. You know, if you have a church of 6 people, your Affirm process, if you're all on board, probably not going to take very long, and there's not a whole lot you got to do, especially if you've already been doing the work the whole time and are just looking to become affirming. If you are a much larger church and have never even thought of doing any of this work, it might take you a little longer. So this process takes anywhere usually from about 18 months to 2 years, but there have been people that have been in the process 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the hiccups that come along. COVID was a big interrupter this time around. Lots of things going on that way. One of the key requirements in the statement, in the mission statement, is that it should specifically include a line that says, and you will receive this, the full participation of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities in the life and work of the ministry. And that is that must be said very clearly, because there's lots of people that will welcome to us LGBTQIAP+ people into their congregations, but they would not be allowed to be married there, say, or they couldn't be a minister there or the chair of the board. But they could sit in the pew, no problem, because all sinners are welcome. So it's very important for us to say very clearly, that everyone is welcome into the full life and work of our community of faith if we're going to call ourselves affirming. Now, many people, because this is a work of justice, the work of becoming an affirming ministry, also open that up to include many other people. So it might say something like, all people, all races, regardless, or we don't use the word regardless, including those of different economic circumstance. We have gender identity, sexual orientation, age, ability, all those things. But if you're going to say them, make sure they're true. And so if you're going to say, including people of all abilities in your church, but the only way to get to your washroom is steps, that should not be included. But that's going to be the work of your own congregation. Affirm United is primarily concerned with the sexual identity and gender identity and sexual orientation piece. Before I jump forward to the next point, is there any questions specifically about vision statement, mission statement? Just making sure your microphones are working. It's very odd not to have any questions. That'll keep us going though. That's good. That's good. Okay. So for equal marriage policy, the language we use more often is same gender marriage policy. And so the marriage policy is which couples of all gender combinations are treated equitably. That's a word that gets around my tongue difficultly. An equal marriage policy for the ministry, if it doesn't already have one, and quite often, a lot of folks have already done this work when Canada made it legal for queer folks to be married. But the key piece here, which sometimes needs updating, is the more openness to our trans community. And so having pronouns other than he and she, or bride and groom, allowing for different pronouns is an important thing to go through. So we'll need a copy of your equal marriage policy when you have that done. Any questions about that? Okay. So some ideas for your new team. One of the things that I think is really important is that your new team work to educate yourselves before you work on creating an education plan for your community of faith. So some examples might be, and that's one of the things I hear a lot. I've gotten called in a couple of times with folks that say, how are we going to educate people? We don't know anything ourselves. And especially if they don't have a queer person on their committee. And that's okay. That's more than okay. You are going to know more than anybody what your community of faith doesn't know, because you're going to find out what you don't know. And so it's a really, really great time to sit with each other and say, I don't know anything about whatever, it could be anything. And I'll use the example of Riverview United Church, which is the church that I minister to, and just to tell you some of the things they did. So the committee came to me and said, like, we don't know, like, what are all those letters about? Like, what are those for? We don't really understand. Like is A asexual, or is it ally, or is it like, what's this 2S LGBTQIA? There's so many letters. Like, do we have to use them all? What do we do? And like, who do we ask? And so we actually invited a member of it's somebody that was very public. It was a drag queen that we saw in CBC, and I happen to know who was the person for the Pride Parade in Halifax. And so they said, what about somebody like that? Do you think they'd come talk to us? And I said, well, I just happen to know them. And so let me ask. And so we asked, and Jason Spurl came, who's also known as Rouge Fatal. And because I know Jason personally, I knew that I was able to say to him, they don't know anything. Are you willing to come and talk to them? And he said, absolutely. That work gets me really excited to do that work. And so contacting somebody that you've seen in public that seems to be a spokesperson for that work, could be somebody from the quite often your high schools and junior high schools will already have what used to be known as a gay straight alliance, and now is a gender sexuality association or something. Sometimes they've changed the name, kept the letters, but Your region might be able to help you too with somebody that's willing to come and chat about those things. One of the important things to do is to make sure that you pay folks that come and offer you their time and their energy, and especially folks from a marginalized community that are willing to make themselves completely vulnerable to you, to not take advantage of that. And you never know what they'll work for. You ask them what their fee is. And for example, Jason said, "Do you think I could get church lady sandwiches?" So Jason worked for like 5 trays of church lady sandwiches and squares. When he did come to our celebration and drag and perform for us, and in that case, we paid him in cash, which was fantastic. But so things to think about with your new team is: do you know what the alphabet is? What do you know about the different flags? Do you know why the use of the rainbow? Where does that come from? Do you have any information about history? History, queer history in the world, queer history in the church, and things like that. So think about what you don't know, what you might want to know, um, and then reach out sometimes to your coordinator, to your region, and different folks to find out um, ways to educate your team before you come up with an educational plan, because that also introduces you to resources that you might then use to educate your wider community. Before I jump to the next part, are there any questions about educating your team? All right, moving on. You guys like want to go to bed early or something. I love it. I'm all about it. It's good. So then the next part would be developing an educational plan for your community of faith. One of the teams that I worked with at one point said, we're not comfortable with this idea of education. How about exploration? We'll explore together. And I think, great, whatever you want to call it, right? Education does seem kind of formal. So whatever you want to call it. But the most important part of that is that you're involving the whole ministry in the process of learning and reflection. So depending on the size of your church, some Affirm teams will go to, say, a UCW meeting. They'll go to a trustees meeting and kind of say, what are your concerns about this? What are the things you want to know? And ask questions first about what is it they'd like to learn about, and then look at how to do that later on. But ideally in the process, you'd learn more about issues around sexual orientation and gender identity in the world and in the church. Some really important work around theology and scripture references. There's a fantastic movie out right now called I'm gonna mess up I think it's 1942 or 1946. Anybody know? 42 or 46? 42. Thank you, Pix. 1942, and it's a incredible movie that you can get rights to play, and it's about when homosexual was introduced as a word in the Bible. It wasn't used before 1942. That can be a sticking point for some folks around it's not biblical. So that's a really great conversation, but also involving resource people and members of your community who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning queer, intersex, asexual, pansexual, two-spirited, any of the different ways that we identify from gender or gender fluid or non-binary. And invite people to share and tell their stories if they're willing. Many churches have great successes of having panels with people on them that are willing to come and speak about their story. And then doing the work of examining how your ministry has welcomed people. What are the things that you've done already? What are the things that you could do going forward? And other things like assessing your ministry's commitment to the ongoing work of justice and care and support. Because it doesn't stop with your celebration. There's lots more to go from there. Any questions about that part, about education? So number 7, how to keep folks in the know. And this is probably one of the most important things. And it's a fine balance between folks that will say, they're always shoving this in our face, to, are they doing anything? Right? And so, use all the places where you would share all the other things that are going on in your church. It shouldn't be any more private or any bigger than any of the other wonderful justice things you're doing. So our church once a month, instead of the minute for mission, had a minute for Affirm. So there was an Affirm update in that time slot. You could use your church newsletter if you have one and have a special affirming section. Engage with your minister around maybe themes throughout the year. There are special days throughout the year that are honored, like Trans Day of Visibility, Pride Week, all those different things, with posters around, with pamphlets. There's some really wonderful pamphlets that are available through the AUSC website that can be printed and shared. There's one, I believe, that got a lot of pickup at our church, I think it was the history of trans people in the church or something like this. But it's available for print, through your social media, on your church sign. And then especially with your special events and workshops that you'll end up doing. And those would fall under your educational plan, the things that you want to do with your community and your community of faith. And I think it's really important, when you do those things, to be very, right from the get-go, public, intentional, and explicit with the process right from the get-go. So not allowing it to, okay, you don't become public and intentional and explicit about your welcome once you become affirming. But why not include folks in the process all along? And it can be very, very attractive to members of your community to know that there is a church in their area that are willing to do this work. And especially people like the gentleman that we heard about in the video today that had been rejected by his church, but still had a deep faith, to know that there's somebody doing that work. So I am going to move to 8 because I can't imagine you have any questions about that when you have any questions about the big stuff yet. So the next one, the third document that we'll be looking for as coordinators before we say, yep, you're ready for a vote. The third document will be an action plan. And this is another piece that gets confusing sometimes. No confusion usually around the marriage policy. The vision statement is sometimes thought to be just for Affirm. So we want to be very clear. It's for your whole community of faith. And the action plan is your action going forward once you become an affirming congregation. So we do like to be updated on your education plan and the things that you're doing, to get to your vote. But what we're looking for in the action plan that we'll approve before you go to your vote is how you will continue to be and work towards always becoming. This is never, you don't, you aren't finally an affirming church. You're always becoming an affirming ministry. It's a constant education and learning, as we know. One of the this became abundantly clear because my Affirm team, of which I sat on and was a consultant on and was not their coordinator. We had a different coordinator, of course. But I let them run with it because I didn't want to be seen as, when that minister came in, they did this and now they're gone and we're not going to do it anymore, right? So it was all through the church, the people in the church. And they invited a congregation. Oh, thank you. It is 1946. The mistranslation. So Elizabeth just put into the chat a link to that movie information. So my church invited another affirming ministry. That's a great thing to do in your educational process, is invite somebody who's gone through the process. I highly recommend that you invite someone that's recently gone through the process. And maybe someone that went through it a long time ago that continues to do the work. So one of the very first churches in Nova Scotia to go through the process, so like 25 years ago or something, was Bedford United Church. But when Bedford United Church went through the process, the issue was around homosexuality. There was no conversation at all around trans, at all. And so the minister that came and spoke to us at the time, who had done the process at the time, he was actually using language that wasn't correct, not on purpose, not offensively, but one of the things that we say is a person is transgender, not transgendered. Okay, so there's a little education. Maybe you didn't know that, right? But had not done the continual work of how do we use language that encompasses all of us. And so being aware of those things, that you keep doing the work and it's an ongoing work, is a really, really important thing. So keeping your Affirm team going is, it maybe not the same people that started it. It grows and changes just like any team in your church does. But it's important that you keep that work going. And so part of your continuing action plan are things like this. So It includes the ongoing work of your committee to reflect on what areas of inclusion can further be worked on, cooperation between this committee and other groups in the ministry to continue the education when new members come aboard, ongoing educational events for your ministry and wider community. Like maybe you make a commitment that every year during Pride Week that you have a special event. Maybe you continue to do some work that you already started with the wider community. There's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. Developing workshops with other ministries within your region is important. Maybe you share that with other people in your area and host something big each year. It doesn't matter, but it's something that you've talked about, and getting involved in the wider community. Part of the action plan is making commitment to have someone who is going to attend the AUSC annual general meeting each year in your area, if it's in your area, or by Zoom, if it's not. And paying your yearly membership fees. And there may be questions about that. And I'd like to leave that question till the end because I'm happy to answer it and prepared to. But we'll leave any questions about the actual fee and how that comes out and those sorts of things for the end. But that's part of the commitment to pay your annual membership fee. So any other questions about things that might need to be included in the action plan? Okay, number 9. So we come to a vote. So here's an important thing to know. Your action plan, your marriage policy, and your vision statement. Those things need to be approved by your coordinator from Affirm, but also your decision-making body, right? So maybe not by the whole congregation yet, but by the decision-making body. Quite often, the marriage policy, there's already an equal marriage policy in place. And so it only needs to have some updating around language and things like this. And so it ends up being approved at your council or your board level. If there was not a same gender marriage policy or equal marriage policy in your church already, this might be something that needs to go to a congregational meeting. That would be a determination from your own polity within your church on what needs to go to the whole congregation or not. But a mission statement usually is something that has to go to an entire congregation. And so that will be something usually at this point in the vote, but it has been approved at a board level. So it's important that that your Affirm coordinator receives your approved from board level mission statement, or vice versa. So if you know that you're going to be going to a board meeting and this is your very first draft, it's really, really recommended that all of your first little drafts, all your drafts come to the coordinator first. So if your board approves it and it comes to us and it's missing some big chunks, then you've just wasted a lot of time and your board's going to get very frustrated with you going back and forth. So leave it to your forum coordinator to say, okay, it feels like it's board ready. Go ahead and take it to your board now. And if there's any changes that need to be made, small changes that they want made, just send back your final one to me and I'll let you know that it's approved or not. And you rarely, at that point does it come back with a change that's so big that we don't approve it. So it's really important that those little steps happen along the way first. The action plan is usually not something that your board cares about, so that's not the thing. So usually by the time you're ready to go to the full vote, your board or council has approved your mission statement, but it needs to go to the congregation. And so quite often when we say, okay, you're ready to go to a vote, at that vote, there's usually 2 motions on the board. And the motion would be, the first one is usually to adopt the AUSC approved mission statement. If that wasn't already done at a congregational level, sometimes it's already been done because the process is taking a really long time. And that came up at the last AGM and you got that approved and that part's already been taken care of. But if it hasn't been approved by your congregation, because a mission statement is something that an entire congregation should have approval of, it'll be done at this point, followed by a motion to become an affirming ministry. So for this vote, AUSC strongly advises a minimum of 75% approval, remembering that the goal is to have everybody feel and be intentionally inclusive. Most of our votes, by the time you've done all of the work, are much, much higher than that. And it feels, you know, if people are even I've known of some, I think there was one recently that was closer into the 80s, and they said, we're not comfortable with that, so we're going to keep working. We're not ready to celebrate yet. We're just letting you know this is what happened. There was a lot of dissension. There's some real negativity, and we're not going to go, like, we're not ready. We're not ready yet. That doesn't feel like we're all on board yet. And so that's up to the congregation. We encourage all who are actively involved in the ministry to participate in the vote. So members and adherents, and we just keep within United Church policy or polity. So the rationale is, like, there's no mail-in votes, there's no advance polls, those kinds of things. So it's however you are holding your meetings, that's who's included in the vote. So if you do hold meetings by Zoom, that would be a legal vote, but nothing in advance. And what's that? 98% in favor. Yeah, and that's usual. Over 90% is more than usual. 100% is never a surprise, because usually by this point, people are on board. Yes, Sean? You need to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Kim. Good evening, everyone. I would just like to say or put on record that as a gay person, a gay man, I wish we could come up with a new strategy to deal with affirming the directions that we take in congregations other than having congregational votes.
Mm-hmm.
I hate being voted on.
Mm-hmm.
It's an awkward, ugly, and unpleasant experience for me, and I really would encourage Affirm, as I have in previous years, to really think about that, because it's not. I don't think in today's culture and society that that's a effective tool of welcoming and inclusivity any longer. I understand why it came into being, but I think it needs to be really rethought.
And we would absolutely welcome your attendance to any of our meetings or the AGM with your ideas. Like, that would be fantastic. We're working within United Church polity at this time, and that's what we've got. And so I absolutely understand, as you know, as somebody that's been voted on herself, whether she was worthy of her job. I get it. I get it. It's difficult to be voted on, and that is also why, and it doesn't really solve the problem so much, but it's also why the vote is anonymous as well. Quite often, people will do this by an anonymous vote as well, which is tricky. But it does allow for real honesty, because chances are those folks that might vote no privately might vote yes publicly, and then you still have a problem, because there's not a lot of they're not actually on board. They're just on board because they don't want to be excluded, which is a problem as well. So there is a lot of problems with the whole voting thing. Let's talk membership in the United Church of Canada. Like, don't get me started. Like, there's, you know, who's a member, who's not a member, who's an adherent, all of those kinds of things. And I hear you, Sean, and I appreciate that, and I'll bring it back to a meeting, but I have heard that before as well. Beyond that, are there any other questions or concerns about the voting process? Yes, Anne.
Not so much about the vote itself, but I was just wondering, when you're doing the mission statement, so you had said that you take it to your board level for approval, but we come to you first. But I'm just wondering how we go about, so is it just our committee that is starting off by trying to, you know, do this mission statement, or are we to go, like, is the congregation supposed to be involved from the beginning? Are we to go to session? Are we going to go to different committees and get their input as to how this mission statement should look? Or is that up to the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's part of the whole educational plan, right? So you're not going to jump right out of the gate and say, we think it should be this. You've involved the work of all of your education, and everything is moving towards a new mission statement, moving towards becoming affirming. And so you're going to talk to your folks about, what does that look like? How are we going to do that work? And that may be a day-long workshop on
Okay.
On a mission. It could be something like that.
Right.
Some people don't need that because they feel like it's already part of it, and they're just going to add the line that they include blah, 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 blah in the full life and work of the church.
Right.
So, and quite often there's a lot of work involved between the committee and the governing body, right? That you go back and forth on that. And in my particular setting, it started off with, these are the things they, once they formed their team and then received their welcoming email from the coordinator told them what they'll have to have in order to do it. They brought that back to the governing body and said, okay, these are the things we're going to have to start working on.
Right.
This is, you're aware, this is the first thing. Do you have any input on?
Right.
We worked on our marriage policy first because they already had one. So
Right.
it was a very simple thing. This is the first thing we're going to be bringing back to you guys in a couple of months, just so you have a heads up. And so there was always a member of the Affirm team at the giving a report basically to our governing body to say where they were in the process and what was going on.
Right. And we've been doing the same thing as well. And we've been in the process, we've been doing lots of educational sessions, and now we're getting to that point where we're thinking about how we're going to, do this. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were going about it the right way.
And it certainly doesn't need to be a surprise either. Like, it doesn't have to be surprise at that congregational meeting. You can start sharing it, as soon as the board approves it, and start
Right.
sharing it and saying, we've approved this by the board. This is something that the Affirm team has been working on be sure to say, with the approval and support of your board. But, it can already be started to be shared on bulletin covers, on posters. It can be around ahead of time. And that gives you also the opportunity to hear, what's that about? Who made that decision? Who decided that? And then it's not set in stone until it's voted on at a congregational level.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions or concerns at that level? All right, so time to celebrate is the last one. And so once you've come back and tell your coordinator that your vote was a success, and tell us what it was, and might have a couple of questions like, did you vote on your mission statement yet? That's, some people get really, really excited, and they actually don't end up they don't even go to a vote. They just say, we're going to celebrate on this date. And we're like, did you vote yet? So there's a lot of people get really excited at the end once the coordinator has said, okay, this is approved. Okay, we're waiting on this piece. And it's usually the action plan we're waiting on. And then all of a sudden we get an email that said, we're going to be celebrating on such and such a date. Yeah, so we have to rein in the horses a little bit sometimes. So when you do come back to us with the vote, then it gets passed on. We have two paid positions at AUSC. One is a coordination and marketing coordinator, or communication and marketing coordinator, and you'll get an email from her, or from them, sorry, that will break down all the things that you're going to need in order to get celebrating. And that email that you'll get from them will include things like how you'll get access to the logo. So there is a unique logo that you saw at the beginning of our PowerPoint. That logo cannot be used until your celebration. It can be used to advertise for your celebration. I drove by a church recently in this area, or in the HRM area, that had that on their glow sign out front, and I know they're not done yet. So I've got to make a call when I get off vacation in the morning. I'm on vacation right now. I'm off vacation in the morning, and say, you're not allowed to use the logo yet, right? So the use of the logo and how you use the logo, how you have letters of welcome from the Affirming family that will come to your celebration, how you'll get your certificate, and then some exchange back and forth on who will present your certificate, who might be in your area already to do that. Folks often are looking for a letter of congratulations from the moderator. That sometimes happens. and just how you can go about writing for that. It doesn't always happen. Now that there's so many all of the time, it is a form letter that you'll receive now. And then how to arrange photos for your celebration, receiving the banner if you want to have a banner up, that big tall one like you see at conferences. And then the things for after your celebration, how you get on the national e-newsletter, connecting through social media and things like that. And so that's that. So after you celebrate, then the work begins of being an affirming congregation or community of faith, and living into that work. So this is open for questions for you. And if you don't have any, I can give you some frequently asked questions.
You were going to talk about the payment of annual fees and
That's the most frequently asked question. What are we paying for? What's this going to cost us? That's one of the first ones that you hear, even when people are interested in doing it. Well, what's it going to cost us? The first year, your first fee that you'll pay before your celebration is $100. So the membership fee from AUSC that first year is $100. The membership fee is based on 1/20th of 1% of your revenue. So your membership fee is a minimum of $100 each year and a maximum of $500. And just to give you an idea, your revenue would have to be $200,000 to have a $100 membership fee, and it would have to be $1 million to have a $500 registration fee. Okay, just to give you an idea. And we get that information from the United Church of Canada. Our treasurer gets that, and they send out the invoice for the fee at the first quarter of each calendar year. And like I said, the first year is $100. So if you know that your revenue for your church is always under $200,000, you're never going to pay more than $100 per year. And one of the things that I like to add when I talk about that is that $100 is a bake sale. It sounds like a lot of money, or what's happened in our community is because we have been so public and so intentional and so explicit that all the work of any of the firm work that we've done at my particular community of faith at River United Church, we have paid $0 out of pocket. All of that has been paid for by community members outside, businesses, insurance companies. We went to every business in our area that had a rainbow flag on their door and said, we're doing this over at our church. Would you like to support us? And we had an anonymous donation for the first 3 years of our membership fees. We sent a letter for our ongoing Pride event that we have each year. And this year, by 11 o'clock the night it went out, we had a business member in the area say, just tell me what it's going to cost. We went, we asked $50 or $100 towards our event. And we got an email that he sent at 11 o'clock that night. We got it the next morning and said, just tell me what it's going to cost. I'll pay for it. So there's a lot of community support if you are very intentional about asking for it. That's where people want to spend their money these days, on people that are making a difference to people in their communities. And so it might seem like a lot of money, and maybe it is. And that might be a breaking point for you. And if that's the case, that's okay. The other important thing to say to your people is we don't have to do this. Quite often you'll hear the United Church of Canada is making us become affirming. Affirm United is not part of the United Church of Canada. It's an unfortunate name. I've talked to them like, why did you choose United when it's so closely related to United Church? It makes it sound like it's the United Church of Canada. Affirm United is a totally separate certifying body made up of United Church people, lay people, clergy members that are volunteers. But the people that are working at Affirm or volunteering at Affirm don't have to be parts of the United Church of Canada. So that's a really important distinction, that there's nothing saying you have to do this work. That's one of the things about the United Church of Canada, is that the autonomy that we're given at a congregational level means that you don't have to do this if you don't want to. So if you're a church that is fully affirming and fully welcoming and doing all the work and are not, just like people that don't want to get married, okay? You can be married for 50 years and never have a marriage certificate. You could be doing the affirming, like I'm doing a really poor job of promoting Affirm at this point. But some people do want to have the marriage certificate, right? To say, yeah, we did it. We're married. Other people don't need that. And they still have very happy functioning marriages. I like to equate it to that. And it's in the same way, people say, well, how long is this going to take? Same thing. How long did it take for you to fall in love? How long did it take you to know that was the right person to get married to, So, so that's a piece of it. One of the things that they want to know too is then where does our money go? I'll get to you in just a second, Pix. An explanation just still around the membership fee. So the first way that I like to explain dues that we ask for is that it's an accreditation fee, and you'll find other sources. The best example that I can kind of compare it to would be the Better Business Bureau, but we're not as easily bought off, I can tell you that. In that case, though, it's a source you can trust, so people can go to it and say, okay, we can see this is what people have had to do to get here. And one of the concerns that we have had and are looking into now is people that did have their membership like years and years and years ago, and what are they doing to kind of keep up on that? So now that we're in that place, that's our sort of our next step. But what you're paying for is monthly newsletter. We have coffee times with our executive director, affirming workshops, the beautiful website that we have. We have annual events and conferences. Your fees also contribute to helping other congregations as they begin to engage in the Affirming Ministry program. The Affirming coordinators were not paid positions. All of the work of Affirm, all of it, except for 2 positions, is all led by volunteers. And lastly, and I think most importantly, is that we cannot do what we do without the financial support of our Affirming ministries. So it allows us to advocate for safer spaces at a national level, and it brings our voice at a national level from our executive director to different things around the nation on behalf of Affirm United. So I hope that answers some of those questions. If you have anything more specific, I'm happy to answer them. Pick, set, or hand up.
Yeah, our regional rep is right here, Tony. And our understanding is that Affirm United has a partnership with the United Church of Canada, and that partnership is now being reviewed to become something even more, I don't know how to say that, Tony, more intertwined or more stable. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I think what I'd add to that is that we've certainly seen in more recent years that the relationship between Affirm United, Affirming Ensemble, and the United Church of Canada has become much more strengthened. And we're definitely seeing much more support at the national level.
Yeah, and that's true.
Thank you for that.
That goes, so yes, we are in partnership. And the key piece around the partnership is that we are not isolated to be only partners with the United Church of Canada. That's the piece I wanted to get to clear up on that too. Like if, say, the Presbyterian Church of Canada suddenly decided they wanted to start doing the work and didn't want to have, somebody in their thing create their own body and wanted to have us look at their stuff, we'd be happy to work with them. We could absolutely work with them.
Can we take Gail's question, and then I think we are going to come to our wrap-up time.
I just wanted to reconfirm.
Sorry, go ahead, Gal.
I just wanted to reconfirm. It's $100 for the first year for the accreditation, and a minimum of $100 for every year after.
Minimum, maximum 500, but you'd
Yeah.
have to have a revenue of $1 million. Yeah.
No, not going there.
Yep.
Okay,
That was my
thank you.
question too, Gail.
Okay.
Most places are $100 a year.
Yep.
And I think just to clarify on that note too, Kim, our regional membership is more than that, but as regions, we pay a fee as well, and that's always talked about at regional debates about to become affirming or not. So it's really lovely that in our Eastern UCC family, we have 2 of the 3 regions have voted and are affirming. And I know that the Eastern Edge Dawning Waters, did I get that right? Or is it the other way around?
I don't know. Newfoundland, Newfoundland Gas Bay
Eastern
Labrador.
Edge, I think it's Eastern Edge
Eastern
Dawning
Edge.
Waters. They have a committee that's kind of just getting some wheels under them, so.
Right.
So our thanks to you, Kim. It's always great to have you join us on this, and I think I learned some more things from you this time, so that's great. Want to remind you too, folks, that your regional Affirm committee, whom you met some of us here this evening, we are willing, you know, in our areas to be supportive as well, to come and talk to folks or to share some of these documents that Kim has mentioned, because of course Kim is carrying, you know, looking after a wide range. So some of your questions could be answered by some of us, and we're open to connecting with you because it's exciting work. It's work that you know is really fulfilling Jesus' mission on the planet, to include, to welcome, to love, to accept everyone in ways that, you know, were quite unusual in his time. And sadly, they're still unusual in our time in some places. And so it's important work. We're all familiar with the flag and Pride Parade and all of that kind of thing, but it still needs a lot of people moving this work forward. And we're always learning something new, someone else new to include in our webinars that I hope some of you have been able to tune into. And I mentioned they're on the resource section on the Fundy St. Lawrence Dawning Waters website. But one of these times, I think it was with you, Kim, someone said, so when are we, you know, when were we going to run out of the people that we have to start thinking about to include? Like, when is the list going to be complete? And Kim's very succinct answer at that time was, when there's no one left out.
Mhm.
And so we still have a ways to go before no one is left out. And so that's why the work of our committee continues on, and we seem to always come up with another webinar, another thing that we need to learn about. And so it's a wonderful, engaging and growing experience for all of us. We don't ever just say, oh yes, now I'm affirming, I got it, because there's always somebody else to think about and welcome. So we just are really glad that you are all on this journey. You're asking the questions, you're keeping in touch, and we hope you will maybe gather some folks around this webinar from your congregations and see what it is. And my apologies that I didn't get the first. So Kim, that video that was powerful at the beginning, if
I'm
we
gonna send that
just,
to you pics, and you can send it out to the people on your list from tonight. I'll send a couple
Oh,
of things to you.
okay,
so you
that's
can send it.
great.
That'll be the easiest way to do it.
That's
Um,
perfect.
And I know that you have a workshop coming up at your AGM.
Yes, we do. We have a
And I'd just
workshop.
like to
Yep.
share too, for those in the Bermuda, Nova Scotia region, that I have a workshop about Affirm United and about the steps of becoming affirming and continuing being affirming at both of the workshop times at the annual general meeting for Bermuda, Nova Scotia coming up as well.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah. So there's really lots of folks around who will gather around with you and have the conversation and, you know, help you with the stumping parts and help you with the celebrating parts too. And so that will be great. So blessings to all of you as you're making your way, as you're making a difference, as you're spreading this wonderful gospel of inclusion and caring and much more than welcoming, making people a part of where you are. So thank you for joining us. And I would just remind those on the committee, if you would stay on for a moment, we'll just have a brief moment of debriefing, but we do thank you, and blessings on all that's ahead for each one. Good night.
Thank
Right,
you.
thank you.
Kim. Good night.
Well, there we
Hey,
are.
I
So
won't stick
Kim,
around long. Yeah, I
no,
won't
but
stick around, but I just
thank-
want to make, I want to make a list of the things that you want me to send to you. So I have it all in one place. Oh,
I really, for me, it was just that link for the YouTube because I messed up. Okay, now I'm supposed to stop recording. Where's my recording button gone?
here, I can probably do it because I'm sharing with you, I think. Request permission to
Stop
record on-
recording.